we can start. Good morning, everyone. I'm very glad to see a couple of very familiar faces and a couple of new faces. For the time being, just a request from my side, a technical one. Please keep your mics mute for the time being. Of course, you're more than welcome to join via video if your internet connection allows for that. So again, good morning, everyone. From what I can see, I'm still winning with the background. It's not the most pretty one, but most definitely a very peculiar one. And it also tells you that, like most of us, I'm not working from the office, but from somewhere outside Vienna in the countryside, so to say. And no, those are not the heads of students. And no, I didn't hunt them myself. Let's start with our topic. I'm very happy to welcome very distinguished panelists. It is the kind of TEPSA larger family, so everyone knows everyone basically, but nevertheless, I want to give you a short introduction about the topic, then about our panelists, and then we have a quite specific situation. Vice President Silva Pereira sent a video we will listen to before we start our discussion. Now, it will come as a surprise to you that I think the book we're discussing today or presenting today is absolutely brilliant. And it's not only brilliant because a lot of us from the TEPSA community wrote in this book. I think it is also an excellent book by doing what it does. It takes the temperature, so to say, not only of the EU member states, but of 40 countries in Europe, and tries to determine not a scientific concept. We still don't know. Thank you, Michael. We still don't really know a proper concept of what Euroscepticism actually is, but it tries to take the temperature and see how is it in those different countries? What role does Euroscepticism play? What about Eurosceptic parties? How much do they influence? Doesn't matter if they're in government or not. How much do they influence the national formulation of EU politics? Okay. And of course, when you go through this brilliant book, there are countries with a long-standing history of Euroscepticism since the 80s, Austria being one of them, Belgium and Sweden are other examples. It also becomes very clear that Euroscepticism is not a matter of right-wing populist parties. It cuts through all the usual cleavages. So we find it on both sides of the political spectrum. For me as an Austrian, I can also say you also find it in the middle of the political spectrum. It always depends on the photo opportunities for the politicians, I think, if Eurosceptic sentences are spoken or not. We also see that in some countries, when you read the book, Euroscepticism is losing steam a little bit. It's becoming less virulent, so to say. It might also be because a lot of countries learned a lesson from the dragging Brexit negotiations and all the things we have learned about how difficult it is, first of all, to get a proper divorce, and secondly, not to sink economically and politically, which I think is still very much on the horizon for the United Kingdom. What is also not clear for us, even for those who deal in much deeper ways with Euroscepticism, what is actually the relation between populism and Euroscepticism? Is it just loud, or does it also play a role, so to say? It is definitely, after you read the 40 chapters, clear that it is very much a concept that is fluid, it is in flux, so to say. There are different phenotypes of Euroscepticism. It doesn't come in one form or shape, so to say. It is really, really different. And we also want to, of course, have a look into the relation of Euroscepticism and crisis management. The last point is particularly important because while we are discussing the last book, we are almost done with the third book in this TEPSA series, so to say. And this third book will look into crisis, from migration crisis to the COVID crisis, and solidarity in Europe. And as a little glimpse into this third brilliant book in the series, I can tell you that it is absolutely fascinating to see And in some countries, like Northern Italy, China is more popular than the European Union because of some marketing stints the Chinese did. Didn't really work what they did, but in the end, when you see surveys where you see that China is more popular or more trusted than the European Union, this is, of course, a major problem. So we also want to look into that. Now, before we give the floor to Rodrigo, who will then start the video, I will briefly introduce the panel here. I said I can do that briefly because we know each other. We, of course, have Alice Cunha from the Portuguese Institute of International Relations. Alice, you're actually historian. I did not know that, but you're concentrating very much on in your work on European integration. You are a very prolific author. I wonder when you live, when you look at your publications, it's an enormous amount. And you, of course, also support and a member of the EU's Liaison Committee of Historians. It's, I think, quite an important position. Marlene Wind is the professor and director of the Center for European Politics at the Department of Political Science at the University of Copenhagen. Marlene is the same, an extremely prolific author, and I would say the foremost expert on the relationship between Denmark, the European Union, but also constitutional law, institutional changes that your forte, I would say. You are part of what I call the EOI gang. You did your PhD at the European Institute, and you're still very much engaged with what's going on there. When it comes to Vice President Silva Pereira, I can only tell you he's a member of the Socialist Party in Portugal. He's a lawyer. And I think I would now like to ask Rodrigo if we can start the video, and afterwards we start our discussion. Rodrigo, please.
Good morning to you all. I'm speaking to you from the European Parliament in Brussels. And first of all, let me thank the organizers for their kind invitation, and also congratulate them for organizing this very interesting and such a high-level conference on the incoming Portuguese presidency, but also allowing us to discuss the fundamental political challenges we face in Europe. I would also like to welcome the launch of this new book on Euroscepticism and the future of Europe that, in fact, bring us together to this parallel session this morning. Of course, you all know that in the last few years, a number of books, reports, papers, and articles were published on populism, on Euroscepticism as well. And so the first reaction when we see a new book on Euroscepticism is, oh, not again. Do we really need a new book on Euroscepticism? That might be the first question to address. And my answer is yes. I believe this book is an important contribution for our debate. And I think that we do need to understand Euroscepticism, to understand how diverse Euroscepticism is, how diverse also are their motives, and that is important if we really want to have an in-depth discussion about this fundamental challenge that we face in Europe. And I believe the book is an added value for this debate for three fundamental reasons. First, because it is the result of a kind of a fact-finding mission with chapters on 40 different countries in Europe, so giving us a wide overview of the landscape, the political landscape of Euroscepticism in Europe today. Secondly, because it allow us to understand precisely how diverse Euroscepticism is, to understand that Euroscepticism can have different political ideologies, even if in Europe it tends to be linked to nationalism, populism as well, and to some xenophobic and racist ideas, namely regarding migration. But in general terms, it is diverse, and we have Euroscepticism in the left as we have Euroscepticism on the right. The fundamental idea of Euroscepticism is an illusion, the idea of taking back control. And this is, in fact, challenging the European project. And finally, because this book gives us the chance to see that Euroscepticism is moving. It is changing. The reality, the political reality, is dynamic. The chapter on Portugal reflects that very clearly, because it acknowledges the fact that we have now an extreme right party that is becoming important in the political debate, which is something new in the political discussions in Portugal, and also having influence in the way that future coalitions for the government of the country itself are being considered. I would like to bring to our debate mostly a perspective here from the European Parliament, because this is a place to have an European point of view on the situation. First, I would like to underline that we cannot ignore Euroscepticism anymore. Euroscepticism is strong. Euroscepticism had a major victory, of course, already with Brexit. But when we see the results in the European elections, we have to recognize that Eurosceptic parties have won in England, in the UK for at least twice, and before Brexit. But they've won already the European elections in France and Italy, so important countries for the European project. And more than that, one of the right-wing political groups, which is clearly Eurosceptic, Identity and Democracy, it is now the fourth political group in the European Parliament, ahead of the Greens, with 76 members of Parliament, representing more or less 10.8% of the members of Parliament in the European Parliament. But this is the ID group, the fourth one here in the European Parliament. But we have to pay attention also to other political groups that can be considered as Eurosceptic now. ECR, a conservative group, is becoming more and more critical of the European integration process, and it has 61 members of parliament with 8.7%. On the left, we have, of course, GUE with 39 members of parliament with more or less 5% of the members of parliament. This is also a critical group regarding a number of important elements of the European integration process. And we could also consider the independent members of parliament, which do not belong to any political group. They are 29, over 4% of the members of the European Parliament. So in total, we can count around of 200 members of Parliament, 205 to be exact, out of the 704 members of Parliament, meaning that we have 29% of Eurosceptic members of parliament here in the parliament. So a huge force, a strong force in the European landscape. Secondly, the Euroscepticism is not only strong, it is also diverse. As you've seen, we have this right-wing, extreme right-wing group, which is also in part a result of the federation launched by Steve Bannon here in Europe. But we have also groups on the left, or a major political group, also very diverse internally, that can be considered in a certain degree as Eurosceptic. So diverse. And finally, Euroscepticism in the European Parliament is dangerous. Dangerous because it is selling illusions, and clearly the disappointing results of this process of Brexit show how false were the claims that were made during the referendum in the UK. But it is also selling illusions about the way to manage migration and other global challenges. And this, of course, challenges the European project in its core. But I would say that Euroscepticism is dangerous also from the point of view of the impact that it has in mainstream politics. We see that in a number of political issues, the way the migration and refugees issues are discussed, even the way that the response to the crisis is discussed in a number of countries, the ideas of the Eurosceptic movement are gaining some room of maneuver inside mainstream politics. So how can we deal with this challenge? And to conclude, I would say that the most important thing is to understand where the danger comes from. That's what we've done here in the European Parliament. And clearly, Eurosceptic movements are diverse, and they present different kinds of dangers for the European project. So we have here in the European Parliament what we call le cordon sanitaire, that excludes any participation of the right-wing movements in solutions and in political reports. And nobody here is suggesting that we should apply the same mechanism to the left-wing political groups, because the danger to the European project now comes from the extreme right, the nationalist and the populist movements. And how this cordon sanitaire works? Well, first, we don't elect any member of the extreme right for any important position in the European Parliament. We don't distribute reports and positions to them. And even if they present a report proposing that Christmas should be kept in the 25th of December, we vote against. So it is as simple as that. We simply don't give to them the possibility to be influenced in the decisions of the European Parliament. And I think this is important to make clear, that the vote in the extreme right does not contribute for European solutions. But more than that, of course, the most important thing is to win the battle of ideas, to win the battle about a positive narrative related with the European project, to reform the European project as much as necessary to meet the citizens' expectations, deliver results, to begin with, deliver results now in the response to this terrible and devastating economic crisis, and to strengthen and develop our democracy. This is what we have to do. So my message would be, if we really want to resist Euroscepticism and finally beat Euroscepticism, let's win the battle of ideas. Thank you very much.
Despite the Vice President can't hear us, thank you on behalf also of TEPSA for this interesting statement. I think it got much better after he said, do we need this book? So he actually brought together the main thoughts also that we have described in this book. Christmas, nevertheless, will remain on the 24th in this country here, not on the 25th. This is an internal struggle I have with my American wife. But let's start now with your introductory statements. And I would very much invite Alice, if you want to start. And after the introductory statements, we open up. Technical advice, you can either raise your hand and hope that I see you. You can use one of these electronic signs that I see you, or you use the chat function, please, if you want to join us. Alice, floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning from Lisboa. I'm very happy to be here with you to share my contribution for the Euroscepticism and the Future of Europe book. First of all, I would like to congratulate the three editors, Johannes, Paul, and Michael, for their fantastic work on not only on this current book, but also on the previous and obviously on the next one. Thank you. The present and future of Europe is, it's like a puzzle, and you have managed to put together 40 different pieces that show how the European Union is diverse and how each piece can contribute in favor or even against the European integration project. That said, I wrote and delivered my chapter in early October last year, and the political situation in Portugal regarding Euroscepticism and mainly populism changed slightly. For 40 years now that the country has had a very stable political system. Most of our major political parties have been pro-European. Only the Communist Party has moved from an anti-European position early in the accession process, but from the early years of our membership that it moved to an Eurosceptic position, which hasn't changed ever since. But still, the Communist Party is in favor of EU membership, of the country's EU membership, even though it has a different project, namely regarding the economic and monetary union, a different position for the country to adopt. But then we had the European Parliament elections in May 2019. That was a breaking point regarding this topic. Why? In April last year, a new political party emerged. It's called in Portuguese Chega, which we can translate into English for enough. Enough of what? Enough of state subsidies, enough of migrants, enough of the Brussels dictatorship, what the country has to do. So the party was then created. It ran in coalition for the European Parliament elections. It only got 1.49%. Still, that represented over 50,000 votes. In a country that only had around 30% of turnout. So only 3 million voters showed for votes on these elections. But later, that same year, in the October elections for our national parliament, the Chega party, the Enough party, managed to elect its first MP, which is in fact something extraordinary since the country had only had a few months since its creation. It managed to, as I said, elect its first member of parliament, André Ventura, which then has been quite cleverly capitalizing all major moments and all major issues that the country has went through in the last few months. There is a discussion whether the party is in fact a far-right party or if it's mainly a populist party for the new radical right. I believe it's the second option, as the party still in creation, in fact, has not a clear position in some topics, but regarding the European integration, it has some defined positions, such as they are in favor also of the Portuguese membership. They are in favor of we belong to the Eurozone, for instance, but they are against, for instance, the lack or the loss of sovereignty. They are also against of the misuse that the Portuguese state does of the European funding, and they are also against a dominant, a strong Europe in the international context. Still, this new party emerging and the positions that has been taking in the political arena hasn't changed anything in the Portuguese position regarding European integration. All major parties, the incumbents, the opposition party, are all in favor of our membership of the EU. But the recent polls show that this new political party, Chega, is gaining more political support. Some recent polls last October show that they have between 5 to 7% intentions in vote. So that represents around 10 MPs for the national parliaments in the next elections. Obviously that we are still from 3 years to the next national elections and 4 to the next European Parliament elections. So many things can change. Many pieces can be altered. We don't know what will happen, even the outcomes of this pandemic crisis. But still, yesterday our national budget was approved. I will quote something that Ventura, the MP Ventura, the leader of this political party, which is in fact a one-man show. If for some reason the leader tomorrow will leave the party, probably the party itself will not hold, will tend to disappear. So it's a political party much based, much supported on its leader. But he said that the budget for 2021 will be the last for the Socialist Party, and that yesterday was the first step, and now I will quote, for the country to take back its dignity, who hasn't had other strategy than to have its hands reach to Europe. So we'll see how the situation evolves and whether Portugal will remain as an exception in the European context or not. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elise. Thank you for this, well, a kind of disturbing picture from Portugal. Even if the number is small, I think we all thought that 205 out of 704 MEPs loosely connected in this Euroscepticism that is a force to reckon with. Marlene, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Johannes, and thank you for Alice and everyone for organizing Carmen, and who else have been involved. I'm sure Paul and Michael and everyone. It's always a joy and incredibly fun to take part in this in these debates. I would have loved to be in Lisbon. I don't know if that had been the idea that we should have met there, but hopefully next year there will be possibilities to travel. I also really enjoyed reading the final project, because I mean, sometimes when you contribute to a book, you only focus on your own chapter and your own contribution. But I really like the style of this book in particular, because it's so accessible. It's easy to read. You can bring it on a plane. You can bring it everywhere. And I think there's also a big chance it will actually reach the general public and politicians. So I want to commend you on that. Saying a little bit about Denmark, I think that as I write in the chapter together with my colleague, Denmark is actually, you didn't, Johannes, include Denmark in one of the old skeptic countries, but actually we are. I think it's quite important to really understand that Denmark, even though we are the obedient complier of EU law and see ourselves as constructive collaborators in the EU and so on, we have a long history of Euroscepticism that is still there. We joined the EU, as you all know, together with the UK, and pretty much on the same kind of basis that we are in there for the market. It's a very cost-benefit approach to European politics. Most Danish politicians have. We still don't have very many kind of full-fledged Europeanists among Danish parties. Maybe the small Radikale Venstre, which is a liberal party in the middle of the whole landscape, is the most pro-European. It's not very big. I think we have around 88% of the votes, so it's not that much. There's also a big liberal party in Denmark that is kind of pro, but it's divided in two parts. There's a part of this party that is leaning towards the Eurosceptic right. And then we have a new social democratic minority government, which is probably, and I'm not saying this just to haunt them or anything, I think this is a general consensus in Denmark. It's been written in many op-eds and said by many commentators that it's probably the most EU critical government we have ever had in Denmark since we joined. That's a paradox, because on the other hand, if you look at the opinion polls, so we have the most EU skeptic government, but the opinion polls have shown since Brexit that the Danes have become increasingly pro-EU. 66% of Danes went to the polls in the European Parliament. That's the highest ever. 66% decided to engage, and the Danish People's Party, which is the most far-right party we have in Denmark. Well, you can discuss it because we have a new right party that is also very Eurosceptic. But in the European parliamentary elections, the Danish People's Party lost 3 seats out of 4. So we had a paradoxical situation with a very skeptic and also in the sense of speaking very badly about the EU, or never mentioning or ever giving the EU credit for anything, government. And then on the other side, we have a population that is very also afraid of what's happening in the Brexit process, and a lot of people are really saying, no, we are not going down that road. we still have our opt-outs, and the Danes who are saying this and who are increasingly supporting the Danish engagement in the EU, they also want to keep the Danish opt-outs. And maybe, you know, I should just repeat that Denmark has, we used to have 4 opt-outs, we have now 3 opt-outs, because we used to have union citizenship also as an opt-out, but that's of course no longer relevant, because it's been adopted by everyone that union citizenship should not replace national citizenship. But we are still out of the euro, we still have a defense opt-out, and we still have a justice and affairs opt-out. And if you look at the opinion polls, you actually see that that the Danes want to keep them. So we are not in a situation right now where Denmark is moving closer to the European core, even though we also don't see a situation where Denmark is going to join the Brits out of Europe. That's not going to happen. The Danes are much smarter, sorry for the Brits. And the Danes still have this approach that it would be stupid for a small open economy to not have access to this enormous market. But I still don't think that we are seeing a situation where the Danish population is sort of embracing Europe with the kind of love and affection that you see in some other countries, or many other countries maybe. Of course, I realize that we have Euroscepticism all over the place right now, but I still think we have countries that are certainly more engaging in EU politics than Denmark are. We also saw that Denmark joining in the budget. Maybe I should just round off by saying a few things about the future and about how I see not only Denmark but Europe going. Denmark was part of the Frugal Four, the countries that, together with the Dutch and Austria and I forgot the last, Finland. What was the last? Oh, I forgot it. But when you had this group of EU skeptics, kind of skeptics that wanted to keep the budget as low as possible. The interesting thing was not so much that Denmark joined this group, because we've been part of this group for at least in theory, we have been part of the budget gang for a long time, but Denmark did not speak up as Mark Rutte did on the rule of law, for instance. So the rule of law mechanism that I'm very interested in and caring about and really hailing in any respect, Denmark has kept a low profile there. So do we see in the future a kind of frugal group that will constantly push in a keep the budget direction? I think yes, we probably will, but I think that this group is actually quite diverse. And if you look at the European Council of Foreign Relations yearly analysis of who has which friends in the EU, then Denmark has actually quite few friends. And you could argue that maybe the frugals are the new friends of our country, but still I would say that this group is also quite diverse. The big challenge, in my opinion, that we are facing right now is really liberalism versus illiberalism. I think that is going to be the big future challenge of Europe. And I also see it in my own country that we have the left-right is not so much the tension right now, because the Danish Social Democrats have taken over the Danish People's Party's rhetoric on Europe. So we much more have this kind of tension of patriotism, nationalism, keeping up national borders, and on the one hand, and then we have the more European-minded liberals on the other side. That's kind of the debate that you see in the newspapers, that you see among commentators, that you see in many places, and I think that is also reflected in the rest of the EU right now. So I think actually that is the big grand debate that we need to face in Europe currently. Will we finally say no to those countries that try to challenge basic European values? In my opinion, and something that I also wrote about in this book, now I make a commercial, is that if the EU does not take this concern seriously and defend its own values, then I think we are doomed. I don't think we have a future together. In only 30 years, there will only be 8% Europeans left on the planet. And my point is that we are really challenged by authoritarian regimes, by all those who try to challenge democracy. And if we convincingly want to proceed with the European project and argue to everyone else outside Europe that we are democrats, we have to start with ourselves. We have to start with us in Europe. So that is really my big concern, and I think the big challenge of the future that also people in Brussels have to take seriously. Thank you, and sorry for speaking too long.
Thank you. Didn't speak too long. It's always fascinating listening to you. I can only tell you that the Austrian government has changed tunes already. We were never against the size of the budget. We just wanted to make sure that it's properly spent. This is what I heard in an online discussion yesterday from the Foreign Office. Now, I found two things very remarkable before I open up, and I see Michael already has a question to the panelists. Find it very remarkable, as the one hand, this kind of schizophrenic situation. You might have a lot of skepticism, but on the other hand, you have the counter movement that there is, I wouldn't call it love, but probably a little bit of more affection towards the European Union. A sign, by the way, we see in every crisis. It seems that when everything is okay, one is more critical of the European Union, and when it rains, of course, you enjoy a joint umbrella. So this kind of schizophrenic situation makes me think about under which conditions does Euroscepticism really flourish? What factors have to come together to make it blossom? And the second thing is, and this speaks a little bit to the scientists in us, you know, what is the relationship between Euroscepticism, populism, and illiberalism? Is this all the same? I don't think so. We must also find a way to accept criticism of the European integration project without labeling it immediately as one of the three, okay? Because the marginalization that would then cause to rightful criticism of the European Union rather supports everything we all detest. Call it illiberalism, call it populism, call it just, well, I'm not quoting the Brits now. I think what Marlene has said about them is really right, you know, unfortunately. So, but I want to open up for the panel. Michael, you were the first one who has a question for the panelists, and I would then ask Alice and then Marlene. And please use the chat function. Paul is not using the chat function, but raising a pale hand. Michael, you first, Paul second. I collect the two.
All
Michael,
right,
please.
thank you very much, Johannes. And thank you for the panelists, Alice and Marlene, for your contribution. It just proves again how important it is to really have these different perspectives from the countries and to keep on actually getting updates, because, well, I have read all the chapters several times, but since the publication of the edited volume, things have already been changing, and here are my questions, starting with maybe to the ones for Marlene. You mentioned yourself, Marlene, that in Denmark there is actually a new party also emerging, and this is actually quite interesting because that combines and links the two contributions of you very well. So, because Alice also was referring to something new actually emerging. So, Marlene, if you could elaborate a little bit more on this, what is actually happening and why is it happening, despite the fact that actually the government, as you described, has become actually rather Eurosceptic and the most Eurosceptic government so far. And on top of this, you have another Eurosceptic party that might have actually lost some support So why is it emerging? Is it a one topic party? Is it actually already going into various policy directions that I think would be just interesting from a descriptive point of view for us to know, since it's the latest development? Also, another question to you, to what extent has value been important in Denmark? So Europe understood as a value union. I mean, for you personally, that seems to be a big thing. I understood that perfectly. Why? But to what extent has it actually also in Denmark? To what extent is it not just a cost-benefit kind of arrangement, but to what extent do values actually matter? And then going on to Alice, if you allow me, well, you mentioned, you described very nicely Shaga, right? Shaga, the new movement and now party. It's apparently a one-man show for the time being. We have seen recent developments, the Azores, that they actually, and that's the interesting thing I want to get at, to what extent this has also become a potential coalition partner, because we see that at the Azores there is politics ongoing and they're offering themselves, and we have seen that in the center right in Portugal, there are at least voices, and I would like to hear more from you, showing not an interest, but also not denying, at least that's what we get from our newspapers, any form of cooperation. So what is the potential of cooperation here in the long run? What do you see there? In the center right, and we saw, and maybe that's a nice link of linking it with the EP from the MEP, the contribution, and linking it with your contribution. In the EP, there is a cordon sanitaire that has been established, and it's actually quite striking how strict, he was very making the point very much, we basically ignore them, we don't give them any room for whatever. How strong is the cordon sanitaire in Portugal? I understood with Chega that for the time being, there is a tendency of saying no, it's a one-man show, but do you see, do you also have established a cordon sanitaire in the established mainstream parties, or is this already kind of evaporating? Thank you, Johannes, for having given me all that time.
Thank you, Michael. As I said, if it's okay, I would collect. So Paul, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here and discussing some of the findings and the chapters of the book with us. I think the cordon sanitaire is actually a very interesting topic, because we can see that we have had very different traditions and different experiences with cordon sanitaire. We have had governments where those governments tried to integrate Eurosceptical parties, and it made them more moderate, some of them. It even made them split up because they couldn't fulfill their promises, their overshooting promises, which they presented as an opposition party. And then you had experiences which were totally different. If you look at Hungary or Poland, for example. So maybe there's also something in there to learn from, but it's interesting to hear how the European Parliament actually works with this. And the Vice President of the European Parliament also talked about the triple D, which I think somehow suits our book very well. He said that Euroscepticism is diverse, dangerous, and dynamic. And the dynamism we also see in the book. No, we have 40 shades of Euroscepticism, easy to read, very concise chapters, but the whole process keeps changing. So these chapters are a little bit like an appetizer or like a teaser for our discussions, no? And we've all been in many discussions on the topic, where the book is actually one of the triggers for this discussion. Maya was in a discussion, or many discussions, Alice, Marlene, Michael, Johannes, myself, and others which are present here today. And what strikes me is we've had a cross-border discussion with our colleagues from France and from Italy And also listening to one of your colleagues, Alice, yesterday, one of the conclusions that I draw is that with the coronavirus and the health and economic crisis and the social economic inequalities which we're seeing on the horizon, we're actually, and that's what the French colleague said, we're actually we have all the ingredients for a new wave of Euroscepticism. We're in front of a sort of a tsunami in that respect. And there the whole question of financial corona help from the European level comes in. If we cannot get away, if we're not able to implement this financial assistance quick enough, there's a lot of expectations and a lot of trust put into these instruments. And Alice, one of your colleagues yesterday said, well, if you cannot implement it, it might cause instability in the Portuguese minority government. So there is a very important challenge and issue here, also from the analysis of Euroscepticism and its dynamics in Europe. And there's one question that I wanted to ask to Marlene on the frugal Danish government. I mean, Johannes was talking about the Austrians before, and yes, Austrians are not against these new Corona fundings because of conditionality, and in particular if Austria if Austria actually succeeds in getting a bigger chunk of the money, that could also be a crucial element. But what I wanted to ask you, the Austrian government has a very clear standpoint on the rule of law and the funding. What is the Danish point of view on this? That will be my question. And the second question, Alice, from your point of view, what is the impact of delayed Corona financial assistance in Portugal? Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Both of my esteemed co-editors took quite some time in asking their questions. So we have now 7 minutes left to answer those questions, or please, Alice and Marlene, anything else you want to come back into, I would immediately give you the floor now. Please, maybe start with Alice.
Thank you. Very interesting comments and questions. Thank you. Regarding the questions about Chega party, yes, there is a cordon sanitaire around the party. First, in the national parliament, no one, in the beginning, no party wanted for that MP to sit next to him. The president of the parliament even suggested for a new door to be open for that member of parliament to come in and come out. He is now sitting next to the Christian Democrats, and he even made a joke saying that now in this current legislature he is in between the Christian Democrats, but in the next elections it will be the Christian Democrats that will be next to the members of Chega. Also, there is the media have been quite attacking the party, making several issues around it. It is not a concise party. It has several members which go from the far right, even Nazi members, to people against immigration, to others who are pro-family issues. So it is a mix of people coming from different political and ideological frameworks. Even the president of the party, he was a member since he was 15 years of the Social Democratic Party, PSD, which is now in opposition. He left the party in 2018 because the Social Democrats didn't agree with this proposition of reforms. He then created this new party, but his genesis, his political path began in the social democracy. So recently, in the regional elections in Açores, he is not part of the coalition, but he signed an agreement that allows that coalition formed by several right-wing parties to rule in Açores. So yes, he is a potential political party for a future coalition at national level, despite the president of the Social Democrats, Rui Rio, doesn't like him, first, and secondly, it will be his last option or choice. He will only do it if he really needs to take office and need those votes. The second question around the impact that a delay of the Corona package, recovery package, will have in the country. Yes, in the beginning of the Corona crisis, the pandemic crisis, all parties were well together. They combined positions. They were all in favor for the positions that the government was taking. At this moment, the situation is not quite the same. Our government depends a lot on European funding, and those funds will be critical for our economic and social recovery. So if these funds are quite delayed, they will have obviously a big impact in the country, despite the fact that even in the last crisis of the sovereign debt, despite the harsh times and the position that the European took regarding the countries, and it was really a tough time, still the position of the Portuguese regarding the European integration project was still very favorable. We'll still want to be a member of the European Union. Thank you.
Marlene, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Not so much time left, I can see. I'll try to lump some of the very good comments together. I first of all agree with you, Johannes, that we should try not to exclude the skeptics, because, and that is certainly not what I want to do. I think the skeptics are very prominent in the Danish debate and had even been supporting a liberal or center-right government for years and years and years. You know, the American Dutch sociologist Casmude says that he actually analyzed Denmark and said that this is one of the good examples of letting the right-wing skeptics into the establishment, but it didn't help. I mean, it didn't. Coming back to your question as well, Paul. It didn't make Denmark less skeptical. It actually did the opposite. That's also Casmude's analysis, that it made the center parties EU skeptic as well, in order to gain some of the votes from the Danish People's Party. So I don't think there is any clear kind of answer to the question of whether it's better to isolate. I love your term, quote, sanitaire or something. I never heard about that before. It's certainly not the case in Denmark. You had a big debate years ago whether it was wise to exclude and condemn those on the right, and the establishment argued, both the Social Democrats and the liberal right, that it's a very bad idea. We should rather take them into parliamentary, not in the government, but as a parliamentary supporting party. And they have had an enormous influence on Danish politics, on immigration politics, on EU politics. And today you can argue that the Social Democrats is actually the Danish People's Party, just in a lighter version, but not much difference. So I would not say that I can today, conclude that it's better this or that. I mean, either of the two solutions. I would not dare to make any conclusion on that. I don't think we have seen an elimination of the extreme right rhetoric. I think it's very prominent in the Danish debate. And just coming back to the new party, the new right, actually I would say that they are in many respects just mimicking in a smarter way, with a very smart, good-looking front person lady who is incredibly good at communicating. So they have taken a lot of the votes from the Danish People's Party. So the Danish People's Party are actually losing so many votes at the moment, partly because of the fraud case, EU fraud case, where the leader of the parliamentary group, Morten Messerschmidt, he was in a fraud case with a lot of money that he took out illegally, presumably. The case is now in the Danish police investigating the case and has been for years. So I think that's partly the reason that they have been condemned by the fraud, but also they have just lost it. I mean, they have just the rhetoric is just sharper, and this new party is even more aggressive in its anti-immigration rhetoric and also anti-EU rhetoric. But together they amount to around 15% of the Danish voters, so that's a lot more in Portugal, right? Values, both Michael and I think Paul asked about the rule of law, and is that at all prominent in Denmark? I think, as I tried to indicate in my intervention to start with, that there is a increasing awareness about the problem with illiberalism, and the problem with not also seeing the EU as a community of values. I think to be very immodest, that I have contributed to that a lot. I've written a lot about it in the Danish newspapers, and in the beginning I was told by liberal center-right political leaders that I was hysterical, that I was creating martyrs out of Orban and so on, because he probably didn't steal any money and so on. So that was years ago. Now there has become today we have, I think, a much better understanding of the dangers of illiberalism, and also of fake news, of conspiracy theories, because a lot of this goes together. I mean, you see that, I think, in my opinion at least, illiberalism and these narratives that are created about Europe in some countries, that people are that Soros is, want to let in Muslim migrants and all these kind of things. I think Europe has a big responsibility there to also make sure that the free press is actually a reality in the entire European Union. So yes, it has entered the Danish debate, and I think it's really on time. I wouldn't say that it's the predominant debate, but increasingly you see the whole debating landscape is those who are defending conservative values, almost a la Orban. You see those people in Denmark with the neoconservatives. I think you have them in Austria as well. And then you have the liberals. So that tension between those groups in the public sphere, in the debating landscape, is becoming increasingly prominent. Denmark is not as such discussing rule of law, because Denmark is, as many of you probably know, a majoritarian democracy. That means that courts do not have a very strong role in Denmark. We never had judicial review. So the whole question of the people have voted, Orban has won 3 times, he's right to rule the way he wants. This has also been incredibly prominent, and it's very close to the idea in Denmark that the parliament is elevated above all other branches of government, because we don't have a judicial review. We don't understand what role courts should play in a democracy. So in that sense, I have argued, I know very provocatively, that Denmark has been inspiring Orban and other Central and Eastern European countries, because we always had this idea that the parliament, you know, if there's a majority, there's a majority, and that's the truth. So the rule of law is coming into the debate little by little, and people are beginning to understand, okay, so courts can also play a role in protecting minorities and protecting independence and protecting the free press, civil society, and so on. But it's something that is moving very slowly. And I actually also think that this paradigm of majoritarianism is one of the main reasons why Denmark has all the way through been a Eurosceptic country. We never understood the European Court of Justice. We never understood the court in Strasbourg. The Danish government, the former government we had, even tried to retreat from the convention and tried to demonize the court in Strasbourg, and that was broad support for that. The only ones who supported the Danish proposals was Orban and Putin when they tried to withdraw or at least to amend the whole working of the Strasbourg system. So I think that the whole debate about majoritarianism versus constitutionalism and what kind of democracy is Europe and what kind of democracy should we be in the future is incredibly important, and that's, you know, we could write a new book about that. Thanks. And sorry for
Thank you very much.
overstepping by 5 minutes. I'm sorry.
Don't worry. I mean, it's good to see that you're becoming so passionate about this topic, which is of such tremendous importance. We are a little bit over time already. You have all seen that the chat has become a little bit more lively now. Unfortunately, what this has shown is A, 1 hour is not enough. B, Marlene, we have a couple of ideas for new books, no doubt about that. But first and foremost, I think it also shows that we have to do a lot of thinking and breaking our heads over the relationships between all the different factors that have been mentioned now. Now, allow me to thank you, all of you who took the time to be with us from the various home offices. Keep safe, enjoy the rest of the day, and thank you again.